Tonight we're going to be talking about a subject that's probably pretty close to most of us. The older people in the audience here tonight might not be as familiar with technology as some of the younger ones, but as you know, this is pretty common nowadays, isn't it? There's hardly a young person that doesn't have an iPhone or something very similar, a smartphone in their hand. And my wife and an older sister she takes out shopping each week have a laugh every week because they go and sit down for some lunch and they look around and they see people who are sitting at the tables near to them and they're not talking to each other, they're not looking at each other, they're on their phones. Now, they might even be texting each other just across the table, we don't know. But that is the way of the world today, isn't it? So the picture I put up there on the front of the screen probably describes the age in which we live. Now, some people say when I start this talk, well, you're going to attack technology. No, I'm not attacking technology. I'm using technology. I mean, you're looking at a screen. I'm looking at a laptop. Okay, so I'm using technology. It's not about attacking technology. You can use technology like any other tool or equipment. Most of you drove here in a motor vehicle. You could have ridden a bike, couldn't you? There's nothing wrong with a motor vehicle if you use it properly. It can be deadly if you don't use it properly, and so can technology. And we want to talk about the deadly challenge of technology and social media when it's not used in the way it ought to be used. And of course, sadly, the bulk of use of technology in our world isn't proper use. 70%, for example, of internet traffic, and this includes business traffic, is pornography. 70% of what goes down the wires is pornography. Now, think about that. I'm not going to focus too much on that tonight. It's an ugly subject, isn't it? But that is the fact. So there's a lot of people out there who are devoting a lot of time to looking at a lot of things that can only destroy and corrupt. All right, but if you use technology for the right reasons, it can be terrific, and you can use it for the extension of the truth, the ultimate glory of God, providing you have that right objective. Well, you know, when I was a child, we used to read comics. I know comics are still around today, but they're not as common today. This was our way of, going into the world of make-believe. And there was a gentleman called Dick Tracy. So in 1946 he was invented by Chester Gould, and he provided this erstwhile detective with something that we kids thought was absolutely unbelievable. He had a wristwatch that was a two-way radio, and so he could talk into it and be at headquarters. Well, today, of course, even 8-year-olds are going around with a phone in their hand, and they can contact anybody, anywhere in the world, with this iPhone or smartphone. So the age has changed, hasn't it? So these young readers like me of cartoons marvelled at the possibility of communicating with others via such a small and personal device. Now we've all got them. But is the world a safer and better place as a result? Well, I don't think so. Is society producing a better connected, caring and compassionate community through these modern gadgets that we all have? The dramatic effect of social media in these final days before Christ comes is quite amazing. It's just amazing how social media has brought about things like the Arab Spring, for example. People were communicating right across here, the Middle East. They were communicating and organising so that they had all these uprisings. And when the army went out, they'd say, well, the army's on its way. They'd have their smartphones. They'd be warning their people to get out of the way. So you see, modern technology has actually brought about dramatic changes in our world, especially there in the Middle East. So it's having an impact that we could not have imagined when I was reading my Dick Tracy comics in the 1950s and 60s. Now that probably ages me a little bit. You can probably work out my vintage from that, but but that's back in the 1950s and 60s. So what about smartphones? What can they do? Now you're going to see slides like this. I'm going to put up a biblical quotation. This one's from Ecclesiastes chapter 7 and verse 29. And you're going to see quite a few of these. Then we're going to look behind it and see what happens if you don't observe divine principles in the use of technology. In Ecclesiastes 7:29 we read, "Lo, this only have I found, that God hath made man upright, but they have sought out many inventions. Well, that's certainly true, isn't it? So, smartphone is better than a two-way radio like Dick Tracy had in his wristwatch. You can have genuine two-way communication. You can even have FaceTime now, can't you? You can get someone on there and you're actually looking at them. They can be across the other side of the world. And they're also like a mini mobile computer. You can have access to the internet without restriction unless you've done the sensible thing and put some kind of guard, and I'll talk about that a bit later. Hence, through email, tweets, I mean even President Obama is now tweeting, isn't he? So tweets and a plethora of other apps, they call them, provide unlimited capacity for the person who's on the go, who wants to communicate, can be anywhere in the world, communicate with anyone that he wants. GPS maps and tracking of other people's mobile devices is also now in vogue. Parents can tell exactly where their children are. They know exactly where they are because they're linked to the GPS device on the phones, and you can say, well, Johnny is going down such and such a street in Houston right now. And they know exactly where you are. So it's a boon for concerned parents, but a deadly weapon for others. This is the tragic story of what happens when GPS tracking is not used for the right reasons. This is a house in which murders were committed. It's a memorial near Seattle for 5 children who were murdered by their father, who then killed himself. How did he find where they were? Well, because he had a GPS tracking device, see? And he located them by that means, went in there with a gun and shot them. Some domestic violence shelters in the US learned from that. When they get victims coming in now, an organisation called A Safe Place says we literally take the phones off people who come to seek shelter in their organisation, and they take the phones apart and put them in a plastic bag in order to disable the tracking systems that are on modern phones, so that, you know, the chap that wants to murder his family can't find them. So that's what's happening. The technology is being used for some very, very awful things. Now, the gentleman you're looking at there is an Australian detective in Victoria. He has a strange name. He's Detective Iddles. And on 30th of November 2011, this article appeared in the Mildura newspaper, and someone handed it to me at a Bible school. And it was headed, Death by Twitter. And it read like this: the rise of social media has been slammed as a factor contributing to murders and suicides. Detective Senior Sergeant Rod Iddles told Sunday's Murder Investigation Forum at the Mildura Club a lack of face-to-face communication had led to some people's feelings of isolation and loss of reality. He went on to say this: he urged people to step away from social media and actually start to speak to people instead of being selfish. The social fabric of our society, he said, has broken down. We have lost the art of communication. Communication now is either by Twitter, by Facebook, by text, by email. We've lost the art of sitting down and speaking to people. And, in his experience, it's leading to violence and murder. That's why we call this talk the deadly challenge of technology and social media, because there's a lot of things happening out there that you may not be aware of. I'm going to talk to you about a few of them, because here's the deadly evidence. This young lady here, Phoebe Prince, hanged herself on the 14th of January 2010. She's just 15. Now, she was a flirtatious young girl. She got herself into strife in the college grounds. It led to the criminal prosecution of 6 teenagers for charges including statutory rape, civil rights violations, as well as to the enactment of stricter anti-bullying legislation by the Massachusetts State Legislature. She endured 3 months of intense bullying, including cyberbullying, and she took her own life. Now, you've heard of that before, haven't you? That's happened. It happens all the time. Ecclesiastes 7 verse 9 says this: be not hasty in thy spirit to be angry, for anger resteth in the bosom of fools. Now, this young fellow is certainly a fool. The heading of this article was Teen Kills Dad After Being Banned from Using MySpace. Now, MySpace is just another communication tool like Facebook. 15-year-old Huxton Schlicker began posting his suicidal thoughts on MySpace. His parents decided that it would be best if his internet privileges were taken away. Yet what they didn't know was that their son would literally kill to share his thoughts with the world. Schlicker stayed home from school during his MySpace punishment and waited for his dad to return home from work. Though he claims his initial plan was to take his own life, he shot his father as he walked through the door. So Dad had taken away his access to social media, so he took away his dad's life. Think about that. I mean, you read that and you think, no, that can't be happening. But it is happening. Ecclesiastes 7, 21 to 22 says this: "Also, take no heed unto all words that are spoken, lest thou hear thy servant curse thee. For oftentimes also thine own heart knoweth that thou thyself likewise hast cursed others." It's good advice, isn't it? Don't criticise people, certainly not publicly, or not even with words that might be heard or recorded, because of course it gets back to them. Little bird flies over there and they find out. Well, today we have a world that's full of that. This young lady, Megan Mayer, born on the 6th of November 1992, her life ended at age 13 in October 2006. American teenager from Missouri who committed suicide by hanging 3 weeks before her 14th birthday. A year later, Mayer's parents prompted an investigation of the matter, and her suicide was attributed to cyberbullying through the social networking website MySpace. Not getting a good name, is it, MySpace, right now? The mother of a friend of Mayer, Laurie Drew, was later indicted on the matter in 2008, but was acquitted in 2009. So this young girl committed suicide because she was being bullied. Every time she opened up, MySpace, there was piles of rude messages that she just couldn't endure in the end. Took her own life. What about this young lady who thought she was going to go for a job? This job interview ended in bloodshed. Nona Belemsoff was seeking a job working with animals. She loved animals. So she used Facebook as a networking resource. This 18-year-old was befriended by a man on Facebook who promised her a job. She met the man in an isolated area and was eventually discovered in a creek, dead. Her 20-year-old killer had created a fake profile claiming to work for an animal welfare group. And the detective on the case blamed social media, saying, "It's an area where predators and perverts and other people just get onto. You just don't know who you could be talking to." Well, this young lady didn't know who she was talking to. She ended up dead. Deadly, isn't it? So we're talking about the deadly challenge, not just from this perspective alone, as you're going to see. One final thing, the deadly evidence. The recent death of this Nigerian girl. She met some friends. We're going to talk about Facebook friends in a minute. She met some friends on Facebook, and they invited her to go with them south. So she went in the car, trusting them. She was viciously murdered while travelling from Abuja to Lagos in Nigeria. She hadn't told anybody where she was going. There are thousands, you can look them up on the internet. There are thousands of similar cases of the misuse of social media. Abuse, insulting people, rumour mongering, telling stories that are not true, bullying, stalking, threats of harm and violence, lewd and repulsive image attacks, so that when you open up, you get all these images in your face, and revenge campaigns. All right, that's what's happening. Because human nature is always going to misuse what can be used for good. It's always going to misuse it. And that's what's happening in our society. Now, what about Facebook? Now, I could ask a question, how many of you use Facebook, but that might be embarrassing, so I'm not going to ask it, okay? I don't really care. I don't use Facebook, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to show you why I don't use Facebook. Oh, my kids do. My kids tell me, I saw this on Facebook. All right, I saw that, I saw this. Well, terrific. But I'm not going to look at it. I'm not going to use it. And you'll see the reasons why. Now, I'm not saying that you should go away from tonight and cease to be a Facebook user, but I am saying be very, very careful what you put on Facebook, because it can be extremely dangerous. There are perils in Facebook. So who created Facebook? Well, this man, Mark Zuckerberg. You may have heard of him. He's Jewish, brilliant. He didn't finish college, he didn't finish university, he doesn't have to. He is now a double-digit billionaire, all right? A double-digit billionaire because of people who use Facebook. That's the first reason I don't use Facebook. I am not going to put one US cent in the pocket of Mark Zuckerberg. He ain't getting nothing from me, if I might use Texan language, all right? Now, in 2010, he was made the Time Person of the Year. Now, Time Person of the Year is not awarded to people for virtue. It's not about virtue. It's about influencing the world. So Time picks the person that they think has had the most influence on human society in that year. In 2010, it was Mark Zuckerberg. He was only 20-something years of age. All right? So he's had a powerful influence. So they awarded the Time Person of the Year to this gentleman. This is what they said in the Time magazine. For connecting more than 500 million people, it's now 1.4 billion people, and mapping the social relations among them, something that has never been done before, for changing how we all live our lives. There's the second reason. He ain't getting me. All right? Changing the way we all live our lives in ways that are innovative and even optimistic. So this is the reach of Facebook today. These are figures I updated today, so I know they're pretty close. America has a population of, 340 million people? 152 million of them use Facebook regularly. That's half your population, about half your population. Australia has a population of 23 million people. We do better than you, 12 million. All right, more than half of Australia's population uses Facebook. Russia has somewhere between 8, and they don't really know the numbers from Russia. India's got 108 million as well. 1.4 billion members registered on Facebook, most of them regular users. And they do the numbers, they know exactly who's using it. 66% of people who use the internet, males, men and boys, use Facebook. But it's 77% of females. I wonder why that is. Well, you see, females tend to be more on the emotional side of the equation, don't they? So that's one of the reasons for it. So China, they blocked Facebook in 2009. Wise move. Iran, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia have at times banned it. All right, so it's got a huge reach in our world. So what's the population of the world today? Over 7 billion? 1.4 billion of them are in the pocket of Mark Zuckerberg already. And he's going to go on. He'll be a triple-figure billionaire if things were to go on for another 10 or 15 years. Thankfully, they won't. So what about Facebook friends? You got Facebook friends? My son, while I've been away, my wife wrote to me and said, Ben's very upset because he had a Facebook friend in America who dropped him off her list. Well, who cares? Anyway, but he was quite upset. Now, Facebook friends. Obviously, social networking is the aim of Facebook, isn't it? And the average number of friends around the world, they say, is about 150. So people say, I've got 150 Facebook friends. And 75 languages are used with a unique translation system. So you can talk to someone in China. They might be talking in Chinese, but the translation system will put it in English for you. And your English gets put into Chinese. Now, there may be something lost in translation, but you find that out by hard experience. So you've got Facebook friends. And this Time magazine article in 2010 shows the fallacy of Facebook friends. This is what they said. Facebook herds everybody, friends, co-workers, romantic partners, that guy who lived on your block but moved away after 5th grade, into the same big room. I love this word. It schmooshes together. How's that word, eh? Schmooshes together. Your work self and your home self, your past self and your present self into a single generic extruded product. Sounds like making sausages, doesn't it? That's what Facebook does. Now, look, this is not my words. This is from the Time magazine, all right? Got nothing to do with me. This is the world's commentary on Facebook. It suspends the natural process by which old friends fall away over time, allowing them to build up endlessly, producing the social equivalent of liver failure. On Facebook, there is one kind of relationship, friendship, and you have it with everybody. You're friends with your spouse and with your plumber, all right? Which is true. And of course, unfortunately, Facebook and other social networking programs lead to addiction. And that's what Time magazine calls the addiction of disclosure. You're addicted with telling people about yourself. You know, you read, I can't believe the things I hear. I have my children come to me and say, they just read something from Facebook, there's a sister on there who's describing how she's putting on her gloves to wash the dishes. And there was a hole in the finger. Well, who cares? But that's the addiction of disclosure. And they say this about it. But there is another danger, which is that instead of feeling forced to share, we won't be able to stop ourselves from sharing. That we will willingly, compulsively violate our own privacy. Relationships on Facebook have a seductive, addictive quality that can erode and even replace real-world relationships. It's good commentary, isn't it? Time magazine. And that's 5 years old. A lot more damage has been done in that 5 years. Friendships multiply with gratifying speed, and the emotional stakes stay soothingly low. Where there isn't much privacy, there can't be much intimacy either. It's like an emotional Ponzi scheme, where you keep putting energy in and getting it back tenfold, even though the dividends start to feel a little fake. All right? It's pretty right. So here's one woman's addiction on Facebook. She couldn't stay away for long enough to do an exam, to get a job. An article published earlier this year in European Psychiatry presented the case of a woman who lost her job to a Facebook addiction. And the authors suggested it could become a diagnosable ailment. The woman in question couldn't even make it through an examination without checking Facebook on her phone. All right, so she goes in for an examination, an hour or so. She could not last an hour without getting out the phone. I wonder how many friends I've got now. Isn't that ridiculous? But that's what's happening to people in our world. And I'll tell you something, I know it's happening to some Christadelphian young people. All right. So that's why we want to point out the deadly challenges of social media. Facebook addiction. So test yourself. If you answer yes to these questions, you may need a Facebook intervention. Do you lose time at work due to Facebook? Do your spouse or children complain about the amount of time you spend on Facebook? Do you use Facebook because you feel shy dealing with people? Do you sense loss of effective control of your time when using Facebook? Does using Facebook decrease your overall ambition in life? Do you feel compelled to check Facebook several times daily? You answer yes to any of those, you might have a diagnosable disease. So says Time magazine. And you know, you can actually pay money now. My wife pointed out to me just a little while ago, she said, you know that you can now go to a clinic here in Brisbane for technology addiction. All right, so you can go to a clinic and pay them $2,000, they'll cure you of your Facebook addiction. Come on, please. I've got much better ways I can spend $2,000. How about you? All right? That's just ridiculous. But it's the world we live in. So young people, don't get the diagnosable disease. Now you might say, well, okay, I can handle all that. I'm not addicted. But there's other dangers, and I want to point them out too. Dopamine. You heard of dopamine? Dopamine plays a major role in the brain system. It's responsible for reward-driven learning. Now, this is why people become addicted to pornography and other things, all right? Because you see, they look at this stuff, and human nature being what it is, it takes some delight in it, all right? And this dopamine is released in the brain. And what it does, it's like the addiction, like someone who's got alcoholic addiction or addiction to cigarettes, to nicotine. It's a similar thing to that. And you can get on the internet and you can see, well, there's all sorts of videos on there about the problem of dopamine. Every type of reward that has been studied increases the level of dopamine transmission in the brain. And a variety of highly addictive drugs, including stimulants such as cocaine, methamphetamine, act directly on the dopamine system. There's evidence that people with extroverted, that is reward-seeking personality types, tend to show higher levels of dopamine activity than people with introverted personalities, so says Wikipedia. So dopamine is a problem. That's what causes addictions. You know, you get a reward, you do something, you get a reward, and the dopamine says, well, I'm going to sort of lock that away, and next time it'll be easier to do it. All right? Easier to get down that same path, and it gets worse and worse until you are totally addicted. And addictions are hard to overcome. Another reason why I don't use Facebook and similar sort of programs. I'll stick with email, thanks. All right? Email's fine. But what about Facebook's threat to the truth? It's a threat to individuals, but what about its threat to the truth? Currently, Facebook is used by Christadelphians, and I know this to be the case because I've been shown the printed versions of it, to publicise their reasons for voting in political elections. We have people in our community in Australia who go and vote in the federal elections and publicise it on Facebook that they're doing it. They want the world to know, and they want the rest of Christadelphia to know that they are voting for politicians, all right? Clearly to influence others to do the same and to follow their example. There are people in our community who are using Facebook to push women's rights issues with a view to achieving equality for sisters in the leadership of the Brotherhood and ecclesias. There are people using it to publish wrong doctrine and diverse prophetic interpretations that are not in alignment with what we as a community have held for 160 years. There are people using it to confuse the world about what the Christadelphian community stands for. That's why the danger is nowadays you have people, you get them into seminars and you try and get them to look at the Bible, and then someone says, well, you have looked up Christadelphians on the internet? You want to type in Christadelphia one day and find out. It's not a pretty picture. Someone said to me a few years ago, Jim, you know there's a Christadelphian homosexual site on the internet? And I said, you've got to be kidding me. So I went home and typed it in. There was. Christadelphian homosexual website. No wonder we can't get people. Because they just get on the internet and look up the community. We shot ourselves in the foot. All right? That's the deadly challenge. That's what it's doing to the truth. And it connects undesirables like those people I've just been talking about in our community. Well, Facebook has many, many buildings that look like this inside. You know what that is? That's where they store all the data. Do you know that there's not one single keystroke using Facebook that's been lost? Not one. There's 1.4 billion users in the world. Imagine how many keystrokes there is. Not one. They're all stored in databases like that. That's why Facebook as an organisation continues to buy vacant factories. When factories close down in America, they buy vacant factories. Why? Stuff them full of databases so that nothing that goes on Facebook ever disappears. Now, it will disappear one day because, of course, when the great earthquake occurs, they're all going to be destroyed. But until then, everything that you've typed into Facebook or you put on Facebook, every picture you put on Facebook, stored in that database. It's another reason why I don't use it. And Time magazine said Facebook has a richer, more intimate hoard of information about its citizens than any nation has ever had. And the US government sometimes comes knocking, subpoena in hand, looking to borrow some. In other words, the US government and all governments around them, they know that nothing's ever been lost, so they want to know something about you. They get a subpoena from the court and they go to the Facebook people and say, we want to know something about this Johnny. Can you tell us? So they get in there and they type up every single keystroke that person's ever made. Everything they've received from someone else comes up. And that can be used, of course, by the government for various reasons. Okay? That's what's happening. So what does Facebook do with all this stored data? In Ecclesiastes 7 verse 11 we read, wisdom is good with an inheritance, but not if the inheritance is a Facebook record that's never erased. A Wall Street Journal investigation has found many of the most popular applications, or apps they call them, on the social networking site Facebook Inc. have been transmitting identifying information, in effect providing access to people's names, and in some cases their friends' names, to dozens of advertising and internet tracking companies. Alright? They're all doing it. So what they know about you? Oh yeah, companies like Google, Yahoo, Microsoft gather information by tracking your web surfing activity through small computer files called cookies, or software programs installed on your computer by the websites you visit. Over time, this information says a lot about your interests. Companies then use the information to make other guesses and predictions about you, ranging from gender and age to marital status and creditworthiness. Then they say this: it's rarely a coincidence when you see web ads for products that match your interests. They know what your interests are. Alright? They've been putting this data together. They have programs that do nothing else but say, that person there, Joe Blow, is interested in this, that and that, let's sell him something. Alright? So that's what comes down the line. Some Facebook data is never deleted. Ecclesiastes 7 verse 8 says, better is the end of a thing than the beginning thereof. But that's not true with Facebook, because there is no end. Every friend request you've ever received and how you responded is recorded in the database. Every poke, now a poke is a nudge. So if you have Facebook friends and they don't talk to you in the last 5 minutes, you poke them. You poke them by nudging them and saying, well, why aren't you talking to me? Send them off a message. Every poke or nudge you've exchanged is recorded. Every event you've been invited to through Facebook and how you responded is recorded. The IP address used each and every time you've logged into Facebook is recorded, never erased. Dates of the username changes and historical privacy settings changes are recorded. Camera metadata, including timestamps and latitude, longitude of picture location, as well as tags from photos, even if you've untagged yourself. In other words, when you put a photograph on Facebook of yourself, they know exactly where you were when it was taken, and it's never erased. They know all the data. They know exactly where you are, what time it was taken. All that information is there. Credit card information, if you ever purchase credits or advertising on Facebook, that's retained. Your last known physical location with latitude, longitude, time, date, altitude. They even know if you're in a plane. And more. The report notes that they are unsure how Facebook collects this data, but they know they've got it. Looking for a job? Young person, looking for a job? Watch out what you do with Facebook. Many employers now routinely check Facebook page of job applicants. You know, I was a human resources manager at the end of my working life for Faro. I don't work for Faro anymore. I'm retired. I had a job. In fact, I had 2 jobs to offer to young people, graduate young people. I had 1,200 applications. The pile of papers was that high, all right? Over 3 foot high. I had to read every one. If only I had Facebook, I could have got my underlings in the human resources area, say that, listen, you go type these names into Facebook and see what you get, and tell me what you get. It would have saved me all that work. Because that's what employers do today. All right? They get in there and have a look at what's on your Facebook. By so doing, they can ascertain what your real interests in life are, what kind of friends you keep, what type of personality you are, your ambitions in life, indications of your attitude and character. So if you don't hear from an employer that you've applied for a job in that organisation, there's every possibility that your Facebook details have had some input into the outcome. But there's even more serious things than that. What if your country went to war? That's not likely before Christ comes, but what if they did? You know, I say to young people in Australia, the very best thing that could happen to you, male and females, if Indonesia attacked Australia. You know why? Well, they have to go through the very same process that I went through in 1969 when I was called up to go to Vietnam. And I ended up in court having to defend my faith with the Crown Prosecutor trying to tear me to shreds and looking into my past history. It would be the very best thing for our Christadelphian young people. Problem today would be that too many of them use Facebook. There would be a call-up. I don't know about your country, you've got females in your army, haven't you, now in the front lines? Yeah, well, you see, that's what happens. You ask for equality, ladies, and that's what you get. You go on the front line. Okay? So now the call-up would be both male and female. Equal. You would seek exemption, of course. If you're a Christadelphian, you'd seek exemption from military service, both non-combatant and combatant. That's been our policy as a community, and that's exactly what I got. Exemption from military service, both forms. The court case would require you to defend what you have said and done in the past against your claims of being a conscientious objector. So, for example, young men, if you've gone out, you know, and you love shooting guns, and you're out there and you put video or pictures of yourself, you'll be in strife. You will be in strife. My best friend, who was my best man, was in strife because his father, who wasn't in the truth, had a television set in the house. And the prosecutor asked him, so you watch movies? Yeah. Violent movies? Yeah. Well, why can't you go to war? Play violent video games, young men? Not a good policy. Because if there's a record, they'll find it. And they will haul you over the coals like you've never been hauled over them before. I know. I had friends who went through it. And I went through it. You know, my father used to have a gun. We used to go and shoot rabbits when I was a kid because that was the only way we put meat on the table. We didn't have enough money to couldn't buy steaks like Texans do, all right? We had to eat rabbit. Ever tried a rabbit? I can't stand the stuff now. Anyway, my father sold his .22 rifle a year or two before my court case came up because he knew I'd probably be called up. So that when I got to court and they asked me, you got a gun in the house? No. No guns. Now saying that in Texas, I mean that's That's sacrilegious, isn't it? In Texas? Well, think about it. They will pick on anything that they can get, and if you're on Facebook and you've got pictures on there of things that you've done, they'll find it, because it's not erased. It's in that database. All you've got to do is get a subpoena and go down. They can get the whole story on you, just like your employer can. Crown prosecutors would carefully examine social media data for clues to inconsistency. And that's what it's about. They want to know whether or not you are a genuine Christadelphian, a genuine conscientious objector. And they will pin you down. Now, this is Time's summary. Warning of distortion. We are running our social lives over the internet, and an infrastructure that was not designed for that purpose, and we must be aware of the distortions it creates, or we will be distorted by them. Not my words. That's Time magazine, 27th December 2010. And this is Times magazine's view. But what about the Bibles? Can you afford to allow social media in any form to rule your life? You can answer that question for yourself. Can you afford to allow social media, in whatever form it is, to rule your life? So what are you going to do about it? Well, as we come to the end of this talk, I want to just suggest a few strategies. I mean, you can point out the dangers, can't you? What's the good of that unless you offer some useful strategies for people to follow? Now, you might not, in fact, need a Facebook intervention. You might just need what you've got tonight, a reality check. Be aware of the time spent using social media and ask, is this really what I want to be doing with my time? Is it? Is there something better I can do with my time? Ask honestly whether social media has displaced Bible reading and study in any way from your life. Has it? You do your daily readings? Do you do any Bible study? If you're not, why? Why not? Well, it may be you're spending too much time on social media. Maybe that thing that's growing on your hand, you know, that iPhone thing, sort of attached to your hand. You might have an operation to get it out. It may be that, because that's happening to many of our young people. And there's another little piece of advice. Whatever comes up on that screen, and it's pretty easy to access anything you like nowadays, never ignore your conscience. I have, all too often. Others have. It's not a good feeling. All right? Never ignore your conscience. So, young people, every time I buy a device where I can access the internet, you know what I do? I've learnt this the hard way. I get a program, an app, whatever it may be, that handles that device, that prevents me from getting on to unseemly internet sites. Now, sometimes this causes me a bit of headache, you know. I'll go into a McDonald's to do my emails when I'm travelling around, and it won't let me on because the first site that it visits is the site that prevents me from getting in to sites that I shouldn't be getting into. You know who's got the password for that? So I can't change it. I get frustrated. I can't change it. You know who's got the password for that? And you know who they send the email to if I said, look, can you tell me the password? You know who the email goes to? It goes to my lovely wife of 46 years who doesn't have any interest in that sort of junk at all. So I'm cut off. And I'm thankful for it. Because now I don't even try because I know I can't get in there. And I know my lovely lady at home is not going to let me get in there. Is that weakness? Yes. But I've got a weak nature. I don't know about you. You might have a strong nature. You might be strong. I got a weak nature. And I cannot give it an inch. Because if I do, it takes a mile. Limit Facebook friends or any other sort of social networking friends to those who are genuinely your friends. You know what genuine friends do? They'll never publicise anything adverse about you. So if you have something that you put up there that you don't want others to see, you just want your friends to see it, they won't pass it on. They'll have your interests at heart all the time. Take breaks from using Facebook and tell your friends you're offline. So this is how you know you haven't got an addiction. You get on there and say, now listen, I'm going to take a 2-week break from Facebook. I'm going to a Bible school and then I'm going to go and see, friends. I'm going to take a 2-week break from Facebook, so don't bother. I'm offline. And go away and enjoy the Bible school, enjoy whatever it may be. That will tell you whether or not you've got an addiction. All right? You can break addictions if you want to. You know, young people, I'm looking at a small group of young people who are amongst a quite large group of young people in our community. You're one small portion of it. And you are the most sorely tested generation of young people in Christadelphian history. Did you know that? You are. And Paul told us in Acts 14:22, after he'd been stoned, he said, as he went back into the city, confirming the disciples, exhorting them to continue in the faith, that we must through much tribulation enter into the kingdom of God. The Lord Jesus Christ in Revelation 7 verse 14 said, these are they which, and these are the glorified saints, these are they which came out of great tribulation and have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Now, what's that word tribulation? It's this Greek word, thlipsis. You don't want to say that if you've got a lisp. All right? Thlipsis. It simply means pressure. Through much pressure, we will enter the kingdom. These people came out of great pressure. And I like this verse in Revelation 7:14 because, you see, you can be defiled by technology. You can be defiled by it. And I'm the first one to put my hand up because I've got an inquisitive nature. When we're driving along in a motor vehicle, my wife sees nothing. I see everything. I say to her, did you see that? What? She says, you'd make a good detective. I probably would. But that's a problem. Because I've got an inquisitive nature as well. I want to know what's there. And when I got caught, I'm very thankful that if you confess your failings and say, I don't want to go down that path, I don't want to be like that, the Father is faithful and just to forgive. You wash your robes in the blood of the Lamb. We're going to talk about that over the coming weekend, God willing. We're going to talk about the judgment seat of Christ and how we can appear there blameless. All right? So it's going to be part of our study weekend. So when the call comes to go to the judgment seat, as it will pretty soon, Luke 17:31, Christ warned, he said, in that day he which shall be upon the housetop and his stuff in the house, let him not come down to take it away. So what kind of stuff's he talking about? So what was housetop used for? Well, in Israel, you used the housetop for prayer and meditation. That's why they used to have a set of stairs up the outside. They had a balustrade, so a man would come home from work at night. He wouldn't go in the front door and say, how are you, my dear, and kiss his wife. He'd go up the outside steps to the top of the house. And there he would pray and meditate in preparation so he could go down into the bottom of the house and perform his obligations as a father and a husband. All right? That's what the housetop was for. That's why it was based on the crown of the altar of incense. The balustrade was like the crown that was around the top of the altar of incense. It was a place for prayer and meditation. So what's on most housetops today? Antennas. Aren't they? This word stuff that Christ uses in Luke 17, skuos, which I like that word, skewed, means implements, equipment, apparatus and gadgets. So when the angel comes to your place, knocks on your door in the evening, and that's when they will come, in the evening, like they did with Lot, remember? You expect people to be home in the evening, can't you? When they come and knock on your door in the evening, what are you going to grab to take? You're going to stuff a few clothes into a little bag? What's the first thing you're going to grab? Boy, you certainly wouldn't grab hold of the refrigerator, would you? You know, you wouldn't get this huge thing. I'm going to take this with me. No. But I'll guarantee that some people will automatically reach out for their iPhone because they can't live without it. So which gadget are you going to grab? Better off leaving it. Because I tell you something, I've just been to Sinai, I stood in front of Mount Horeb where the judgment seat will be held, and the reception ain't good. Telephone reception's not good. Wasting your time. But think about that. You know what Christ is saying there, brothers and sisters and young people? He knew exactly what our challenges would be when he came. He knew exactly. And he's giving us a warning. So technology and social media have their uses, don't they? Used wisely. But they can be a deadly enemy if they're not used wisely.